So even if you aren't Catholic, I want you to hang on for a second and watch this video. Pope Leo, usury corrupts the human heart and enslaves the poor. So what is usury? In the modern times, we define usury by loans with excessive interest rates. You're thinking about payday loans, a lot of credit cards that are purposely predatory. But actually, historically, usury was considered any loan with interest at all. So what changed? During the Reformation, you had a lot of thought leaders come out like Martin Luther and John Calvin, who wrote extensively about usury. Now, they disavowed it and said it was evil and bad to give out interest on loans, but they said maybe in some cases a small amount of interest on loans was acceptable. So what did they mean? They viewed a small amount of interest, like 4 or 5% on the lifetime of a loan, as maybe morally acceptable, and usually only in business cases, right? They had no idea that in the future there would be compounding interest where people have 27% interest on a credit card, and every year they get hit with this massive interest charge. They make the minimum payments. It's going to take them 100 years to pay it off. Essentially, they're just trapped in debt. Now, what's the biblical basis for this? Well, we know that in Proverbs 22:7, it says that the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is the slave of the lender. Okay? Now, most Christian countries had usury banned in Christian monarchies for hundreds and hundreds of years. And these were prosperous Christian countries in Europe that conquered like the entire globe without needing to get a loan out. And usually what would happen is these wars would start and these central banks would pop up and say, hey, we'll give you money for this war. And then next thing you know, the banks kind of own that country in a way. The monarch is doing whatever the bank wants. Now, in modern times, many Islamic countries actually still have usury completely banned. You can't get a loan with interest rates. Why is usury so bad? This is something really big that I want you to think about. Who owns you? Okay? Many people would say that the largest source of power in their society as Americans would be the federal government, right? But did you know that the average citizen this year, and many years behind it, will pay more money in interest on debt to private banks than they will in federal taxes to the government? So, and a lot of people say, well, just don't get a loan, don't do that. This is the problem with this type of stuff. Usury allows people, money lending with interest, to live beyond their means. It allows them to buy something that they can't afford. And, well, why is that bad? Because I bought a house and I struggled, sure, but then I paid it off. So every time you get one of those loans, it's actually causing consumer purchase power driven inflation. So what does that mean? It means that, for example, a college degree. What incentive would a university have to lower their tuition cost every year? They have none, because if they charge an extra $3,000 every year, guess what? The student is still getting a loan for it regardless, and they go into debt. Now, back when college loans weren't common, college degrees were much more affordable. Okay? A lot of times people could just get part-time jobs as students and pay off their college degree before they were even done graduating. All right? This is like a long-forgotten world. People go, what? I don't know what you're talking about. If you go back, car loans, the same thing. Cars used to be much more affordable. A brand new car was much more affordable because people didn't get loans. If you got a loan on a car when the consumer automobile became popular initially, people would be like, oh, that seems like incredibly irresponsible. People saved up and bought cars. So it kept the price lower because they know if they make the price too high, then people won't buy the cars. This also applies to housing. So, and before home loans were common, less people owned houses, but the people who owned houses actually owned them. They didn't owe a 30-year debt agreement to a mortgage lender. They owned their home, okay? So they say, oh, well, it's better to just do this. Well, is it? Because now we're in this kind of debt spiral that just eats itself. And so what's happening now is that everything gets more expensive because of lending, and then you have to get more debt to keep up with the expenses. So you have people going into consumer debt over stuff that are basic household needs, high interest debt. To make matters worse, the money from these loans is not transferred from an account Like the bank doesn't have a big account that says, this is money that we're going to lend out, and then it sends it to you to spend on house, car, student loan, whatever. It's all created out of thin air through our fractional reserve banking system. Now, what they do is they used to say, well, if you have $1 in a bank account as a bank, you can lend out $8. You can create 8 new dollars as credits and put them in an account somewhere for someone to spend, and then they have to pay that back to you. Okay? They knew that X percentage of people would always pay the debt back. So as long as the system stayed within its bounds, things kind of worked out. You'd have some bank collapses here or there, and they'd add some more regulation and more regulation. But the problem is, since 2020, since COVID happened, they removed that fractional reserve debt ratio. So what does that mean? It literally means that a bank right now legally can get a $5 deposit and create $1 million as debt. Okay, our money is debt-based. We have no idea how much money is actually in our economy. Every time that you get a loan, you're devaluing the money that's already in your pocket. All of your money has debt attached to it. Okay? So every time anyone gets a loan, it devalues money. And what is money? Money is supposed to represent labor. Okay? So you're devaluing labor. So you have all these people who go like, I don't understand. I got a college degree. I got this good job at this corporation, and I'm making $90,000, $100,000 a year, and I'm still, I can't get by. I'm living with roommates, and I got all this student loan debt, and I got all this stuff. Dude, that's why your money is worthless. Okay? Now let's go back to like medieval peasant times. Not great times for a lot of reasons. However, in these nations that had usury banned, where you had all this feudal system of people living on the landlord's land and paying their taxes to the king. If you look in like Spain, I was just reading about the Reconquista there and about their system of knights and everything. And the average person's taxes that they paid to like the lord above them, and they were able to farm this big plot of land and live in peace and have food to eat and shelter for their family. It was like 4 chickens and a loaf of bread or something like that. Or maybe it was like 4 loaves of bread and a chicken they had to pay once a year to these lords. Even accounting for inflation, modern inflation, the average person in like medieval Europe had to make around the equivalent of $500 per year to feed themselves and live and support themselves. $500 per year. That's with inflation included. So imagine if you only had to make $500 at your current job to have all your basic needs met. Obviously, we have a lot more needs to meet now. But what I want people to realize is that the banks are actually the ones in charge here. It's not the federal government. It's not the politicians. They are all errand boys for these big banks. The last person who actually kicked out the central bank in their country was the most recent person who tried was Javier Milei. And as soon as he got in office, the IMF called him and said, hey, if you kick out the banks, we'll bankrupt your entire country.